Hi everyone, and this is the batch review for Bio 2. So I hope you have already prepared very well for that. So this is for quarter 1, long test number 1. And here are some reminders you need to take note of. We discussed this beforehand. So you will, number 1, need to answer on the answer sheet. So don't answer on the questionnaire. Number 2, there are two types of questions that we have. We have the MCQ, multiple choice question, and you're going to be writing out the capital letters only. For the short essay, please do write briefly, only around 2 to 4 sentences. Now, other things to take note of, take note that you can write on or mark the questionnaire. Probably would like to take note which questions you have yet to answer, so you can make some markings there. And then for number 4, it's not an issue for me if there will be erasures on your paper, on your answer sheet, but make sure that you will cross out clearly and the wrong answer and write down clearly what is your correct answer, so I won't be confused. Good. Number 5, bring an extra pen, no pencils. And then number 6, as given by the memo from the CID, no one is allowed to go to the CR during the examination. So that's why you need to go there before the examination starts. Number 7, put all your things on the walls of the classroom, so only your ball pens and your correction tapes will be found on your table, and then you will have your water bottle on the floor. Now these are the exam guides. So our examination will include the following modules. So module 2.3, that will be 7 points. Module 3.1, animal reproduction, 7 points. Module 4.1, human male reproductive system, 7 points. And module 4.2, human male reproductive system, 7 points. Female reproductive system, 6 points, and female reproductive system hormonal control would be 6 points. So those are all the things you have to take note of, the modules and the number of points for each of the given modules. So let's now start with our batch review by starting with the introduction, module 2.1, and plant reproduction or plant reproduction. So just to put everything into perspective, life on Earth has been there for a long time. So this will imply that from the very beginning, there is a mechanism by which a next generation will produce a next generation, and so on and so forth. So animals can produce the next generation, mushrooms, fungi can reproduce, even the microbes and the protists can also reproduce. The plants as well, as you can see at the background, can also reproduce. So what we're going to be talking about would be the modes, the strategies of reproduction. First of all, we'll talk about the plants, and in the next module, we'll talk about the animals. Now, before that, let's look at some important introductory information. You already know this. What are the differences of the asexual versus the sexual reproduction? As you can see in the picture over here, in terms of the criteria number of parents, asexual reproduction, we always only have one parent, while the sexual reproduction, we always have two parents, male and female. In terms of what offspring looks like, the asexual reproduction offspring would be identical to the parent, while for sexual reproduction, the combination of two parents would entail differences in the offspring compared with the parents. What the DNA looks like for asexual reproduction, since the offspring is identical to the parent, it is also identical to the parent as well, same DNA. While for sexual reproduction, since it's a combination, you would expect it will be different. That's why combination of the two parents. Finally, the fourth criteria for a sexual reproduction, cells involved, well, it will be the somatic or body cells. So it's not the sex cells, which is actually the cells involved in sexual reproduction. So those are some comparisons that we made between asexual and sexual reproduction, which is very familiar with you. Now, what we're going to be doing here is just go all over again the asexual reproduction in different types of organisms. So we'll start with the microorganism and then also with the protists. So what are their modes of asexual reproduction? If you still remember, it will be binary fission, wherein the cell will be cut in half or will become half because of that. So this was called binary fission. So here's a picture of that, a video of that. So you're very familiar with how microbes are able to undergo asexual reproduction. So here's another video showing that asexual reproduction where the bacteria will be halving themselves and undergoing fission. So that's it. Binary fission would be the mode of asexual reproduction for bacteria. For protists, such as paramecium, it's also binary fission. It might be quite they're a different organism, but they have quite the same kind of asexual reproduction. That's the binary fission over here. So you can see here the video. Here is a paramecium, and here is the another paramecium. So uh, essentially, an organism or one paramecium has been cut into two because of binary fission, and that's how asexual reproduction happens in the protist. Here's another picture of that or video of that showing you how the two eventually separate from a single paramecium. All right. Now, we're already done with the asexual reproduction. So the next question would be, how do microorganisms and protists undergo sexual reproduction? So do remember that when we talk about sexual reproduction, it is the exchange of genetic information, a combination of the genetic information. So for the microorganism, you can see here that there is a sex pilus that is produced, and then the DNA is transferred from one of the bacteria towards the other bacteria. This is called conjugation, and this is a type of sexual reproduction in microorganisms because there is an exchange of genetic material, combination of genetic material. Here's a picture of that. That is the conjugation. This is sex pilus. As you can see here, where the DNA would be transferring from one bacteria to the next. And here is a video of that. You can see over here how the red colored DNA is going to the other bacterium incorporated in that. So now you have a new combination of genetic information. So sexual reproduction also happens in bacteria microorganisms. Now, in terms of the protists, the protozoa, sexual reproduction also happens. In this case, it's called conjugation as well. But instead of having a pilus, for example, you have your paramecia, they will just combine together, get close to each other, and then they will be exchanging their DNA, particularly the micronuclei. You can see here the orange and orange, the green and green on the other, and then they will be exchanging that. As you can see, now they have a new combination of DNA. So this is an example again of sexual reproduction because there is a recombination of the DNA. So we're done with that. So here's a video of that. Here's a conjugation of the paramecia, two paramecia in this case, and you will be expecting that the DNA will be exchanged and there will be a new combination resulting to that. All right, so we're done with a survey of how microorganisms have asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. This time around, let's talk about the asexual reproduction in plants. So as we talk about the strategies of reproduction in plants, we'll talk with firstly about the asexual, and then we'll talk about the sexual reproduction. So you're already very familiar with this. What are the 6 ways of natural asexual reproduction in plants? Bracts, that will be bulb, rhizome, adventitious roots, corm, tubers, and stolon. So just be very familiar with this one. So when we talk about the bulb, an example would be the onion, as you can see over here. So these are underground fleshy leaves. So you can see here, and you can see that from the fleshy leaves, indeed, a new organism or a new plant, a new onion can grow from that. So it is underground buds that have fleshy leaves. Example would be onion. Another example or another strategy will be rhizomes, and rhizomes are horizontal underground stem which puts out laterals. So examples are ginger, bamboo, canna lilies. So these are some examples of the rhizome. Again, underground stem. Adventitious roots, on the other hand, these are roots that grows from the stem or the leaves or from some other place except the root area. So this is an example. This is katakataka, very familiar with us. So you will see here that roots are grown from the leaves so that this can produce new individuals. So we're done with the bulb, we're done with the rhizome, we're done with the adventitious roots, and then this is another example of the adventitious roots, this time coming from the stem themselves, very big branches. Okay, number 4 is the corm, a rounded, thick, modified underground stem base, so underground stem. An example of this is crocus, gladiola, and as the picture shows us, gabi or taro. So again, underground stem base. All right. Tuber, just like potato, these are also fleshy underground stems. So this is actually very familiar with us. Tubers are fleshy underground stems. Now, stolon is a creeping horizontal plant, stem, or runner that takes place or takes root at points along its length, like the makahiya plant. So you will be noticing it's very difficult actually to kill this because there will be a lot of runners for the whole plant. So that's a stolon. That's another asexual method of reproduction. So we're done with the natural. Let's talk about the artificial. So don't forget the mnemonics, GCLMN. So very familiar with us, this is grafting, C is for cutting, L is for layering, M is for marketing, and M is for micro-propagation. So you're also very familiar with this, very easy to remember. So grafting is simply two plants being joined together. So you have a scion, and then you have the base over here. So just like tomato and eggplant. So when they you put them together, the wound will heal. Now you have, for example, a tomato on the top and an eggplant on the bottom. This is an artificial way of asexual reproduction. Cutting, just like in malunggay, is simply a branch cut out and then you plant it on the soil. So this is cutting, and then you put it and then it will grow. So it's actually very familiar. So here are examples like the kangkong. If you cut it, you grow it in water, you can produce a new plant just like that. Also malunggay, as mentioned a while ago, you can see here my garden. So I cut the malunggay, planted it, and now it grew a new, it's now growing as a new tree. Okay, alugbati even, and now you have leaves growing out of that. So those are example of what we call as cuttings. Layering, on the other hand, this is bending and pegging the shoot of a living stem to the soil, so just like this one. So of course, the objective is to produce a layer of roots here, so that later you can cut this out and it can grow into another tree. So that is layering. So you have grafting, you have cutting, you have layering, GCL, and then we have the last two, MM, marketing. In this case, you will be wounding the stem, putting some coir or some soil, and then eventually the purpose is to produce new roots for that. Okay, so you can see here the wound, and then put in some soil or coir, and then it will be able to produce new roots, which can be planted to become a new plant. Lastly, you have micro-propagation, and these are small pieces of plant tissue from the mother plant, and you grow this under laboratory conditions. So you take out small pieces, put it into a nutrient gel, able to grow it using different kinds of hormones, and once they grow new leaves, you can plant them in the soil. So this is actually very interesting. So here are examples of that. You will see them inside the gel and inside the containers. Micro-propagation. So we're done with the different ways that plants do asexual reproduction. Now, how about sexual reproduction? Now, do take note, they will have egg cells and sperm cells, and there will be a male and a female structure to produce sexual reproduction in plants. So what are again the two important essential requirements? The existence of haploid gametes and the fusing together of these gametes, producing a diploid zygote through the process of fertilization. So you're very familiar with that. Now, you have to remember that there is a very important characteristic of plants, and that's what we call as alternation of generation. Simply it means is that the gametophyte, one generation, will give rise to the sporophyte, and the sporophyte that was just given reason to will give rise to another gametophyte, so on and so forth. So gametophyte to sporophyte, sporophyte to gametophyte, gametophyte to spore. So there is an alternation of this generation. Now, from the name itself, gametophyte, this is haploid, and its purpose is to give structure, produce structure that will eventually produce the gametes. And then you have the sporophyte, which is diploid, and its important function is to produce the the spores. So you can see in the picture here, number one here, the whole structure here is the sporophyte, and under the leaf of the sporophyte would find orange brown colored circular structures, which are the sorus, which actually contains the spores. The spores are haploid at this point in time, and then it will, after division, several division, give rise to gametophyte. The gametophyte will produce two structures, which will be the antheridium, which would contain the sperm, and the archegonium, which contains the egg. And then the sperm cell will fertilize the egg cell here, become a diploid zygote, and then it will produce what we call as the gametophyte. So that's how it is. Very interesting. So embryo will undergo meiosis here in order to produce the gametophytes. The gametophyte becoming the spore, producing the the sporophyte producing the gametophyte, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's it. That's just a simplified version of gametophyte. Produce gametes. They fuse together. The zygote undergoes mitosis to produce sporophyte, and then the sporophyte undergoes meiosis to produce the spores, and then the mitosis to produce the gametophyte. Okay, let me just correct myself that the spores will undergo mitosis to produce gametophyte, which will be the haploid generation. All right. So that's it. So do take note of this one. So let me just go over the reproductive characters of the different plant taxa. So this will give us an idea what are the different strategies in the different plant groups. So the dispersal unit of bryophytes would be, or mosses would be, spores. The lycophytes would be spores as well. But for the vascular tissues, vascular plants like gymnosperms and the angiosperm, you have seeds, seeds, and seeds. The gymnosperm are naked seed. The monocots have enclosed seeds with one cotyledon, and the dicots would have enclosed seeds with two cotyledons. Now, in terms of gametophyte, for the bryophyte, the gametophyte is dominant, it's bigger, and then the lycophyte, it is reduced, smaller, but still independent. For the vascular plants, the sporophyte is now dominant, biggest structure, while the gametophyte will be reduced or microscopic and would be depending on the sporophyte. And we already know this, so if the gametophyte is dominant for the bryophytes, then the sporophyte will be reduced and dependent. For the lycophytes, the gametophyte the sporophyte will be dominant, and for the vascular plants, it will be dominant. So that's why you can see that trees are bigger here, and it's actually very important because with the trees being dominant and the gametophyte being microscopic, we can see that the vascular plants are actually more successful. Reason being that they have a lot of structures that help them to survive in terrestrial conditions or arid conditions, like the roots, the stem, the leaves that would be undergoing photosynthesis. And it's very important that the gametophyte, the excellent sperms, are actually being protected inside of the flower. All right, so you can see here that there is that trend. So from the algae, which would be the ancestor, going towards the most recent, the angiosperm, the gametophyte is getting smaller, while for the sporophyte, it is actually getting bigger from the lower plants like bryophytes going towards the plants. It will now be bigger. And again, as explained a while ago, the reason that it's become more dominant is because of the adaptation to produce, to obtain more water, to protect themselves from the elements because of the terrestrial and arid conditions of terrestrial environments. All right. Okay, so let me just finish up with this one. The seeds, it protects and provide nourishment to the fragile diploid embryo. So this is very important. The seed will be protecting the zygote produced from the sperm cell and egg cell. Flowers are also very important because the flowers will be assisting in pollination, so that the species will be able to disperse themselves even better. Flowers are very important. Pollination is also very important here, and this is the act of transferring the pollen. Okay, how do flowering plants transfer the pollen? We already know this. It can be abiotic, so wind and water. Abiotic factors like birds, insects, reptiles, and mammals. So these are all what we call as pollinators. So this is how pollen is transferred from the male structure towards the female structure. Okay, we already know that. And these are the ovules, later on becoming the seed. So take note that the ovary wall here later becomes the pericarp of the seed, and the ovules later becomes the seed themselves. So do remember that fruits are always coming from a flower. always developing from the flower. That's why it's called the ripened ovary, or the fruit is called the ripened ovary. So if you remember the apple, the soft, sweet flesh that we eat, that's actually the pericarp, while the seeds inside will be that used to be the ovule. So the flowers later, if the egg cell and the sperm cell fertilize together, will produce the fruit later on. But the other parts that are actually fleshy, like the root crops, like the corm, stuff like that, the bulb, these are asexual mode of reproduction, and they are actually called vegetables. So just take note of that. How do plants spread their seeds? So no longer the pollen, but the seeds. So there can be several ways. It can travel by wind, because they're very light. It can travel by animals, because there would be some thorns from there that allows them to catch a ride on the fur of the animals. By water, because they can float in the water. By bursting, the structures will eventually twist and then burst, so that it will throw away the seeds a bit far. So this is how it is dispersed. And then finally by humans, like eating the cherry, eating apples, bananas, and then you throw away the seeds. So these are how seeds are able to travel. Finally, we have here the double fertilization, another important characteristics of the flower. So just take note that in double fertilization, the egg cell and the sperm cell simultaneously will be fusing together. So you have actually two sperm cells here that will fertilize two structures. One is the egg cell, and the other one is the polar nuclei that will become the endosperm, while the egg cell that was fertilized will become what we call as the zygote. So that's why double fertilization, because two structures were fertilized at the same time. So finally, let's just look at here. So we have the structure. So we have the anther. You already know this one. So this is the male structure, the anther. And then you also have the filament, Fa. The whole structure here is called the stamen. So that's really, helps you remember that it's really male because of the men stamen. And inside of the anther would be the pollen. Then you have here the pistil, particularly the SOS. You have the stigma, you have the style, and then you have the ovary here. The ovary will be containing the ovule, and then the whole thing is called the pistil. So that's the female reproductive structure of the flower. So you have also the petal here that will attract the pollinators, the sepal, the flower axis, pedicel, and the nectary. Alright, so that will be ending the introduction and module 2.1.